What's up, guys? Thank you and welcome back to our show. If you can tell, this is kind of where we started back to day one. So this is, I don't know, I'm kind of nervous in here, but today we're going to be talking about a lot. We're going to be talking about sexuality, we're going to be talking about gender, maybe race, I don't know. But this is Micah Brady.
Hello.
And today the conversations are going to be tough. And, if any of this makes you feel uncomfortable or weird, that's the point. When we started this video and this channel, we talked about we wanted to have these hard conversations because these are conversations that sometimes church don't talk about, and that's the point of this whole just channel. So do your research. Also, just kind of take it in and see what you think about it, and just be ready to just kind of learn something new, and just be receptive to it, and just pray over it. And I forgot to pray again. So we'll be right back. All right, we're gonna be right back. That's gonna be our stop right there, or he's gonna cut it.
Cool.
So we're gonna pray really quick, and then we go right back to the video. All right, so we're back. I prayed, let that out. And so now you're gonna kind of get to know Micah, and so I'm just gonna have her kind of share from like when you were born to middle school, high school, college, and just to the present day. So feel free.
Cool. So I grew up in the Midwest, Chicago specifically. My dad's a pastor, so pastor's kid. It's fun. And yeah, I actually really enjoyed being a pastor's kid because I felt like I always had someone reliable to go to with my questions. And that helped me a lot because I struggled with like a lot of fear of like the unknown and like, what if I'm wrong about everything? And so, yeah, always kind of looking for the right answer, basically. And then in 8th grade, started questioning my sexuality. Basically, I was like, girls are pretty, but I'm still attracted to boys, so like, does it matter that I'm attracted to girls? No, I'll just ignore that for the rest of my life, and that was my plan. I was like, okay, I'm bisexual, let's forget about it. And I didn't tell anyone for like 5 years. The only person that knew was my best friend Ellie, and she helped me a lot. She helped me process pretty much everything. I didn't even know I was processing with her, and it was really helpful to just have someone to talk to about it and like normalize it for me, because I didn't think it was normal. I thought it was wrong. And so yeah, I started coming out to people my freshman year of college. And that mostly came about because I started getting into this a relationship with this girl, kind of like accidentally. We really liked each other, but we were like, no, that's wrong. And yeah, we both struggle with a lot of guilt, and which obviously messes up any relationship. So it wasn't healthy, and I came out to my parents, and they were super receptive of it. And like, I know they believe it's a sin, but they didn't feel the need to remind me of that. Like, I know what they believe, and so they really emphasize like, we love you and we want to be there for you, we want to support you. They asked me to go to therapy, not to fix me. I think it's important to know that it's not something you can fix. But my parents knew I was struggling with a lot of emotional problems at the time that I didn't have the tools to deal with. And since I go to school like 2,000 miles away from them, they felt that was the best way they could support me. So I went to therapy. Best thing I ever did. Yeah, just taught me to feel my emotions, which I didn't know how to do because I shut them down my entire life because I didn't want to have crushes on anyone. And yeah, so feeling my emotions, accepting my sexuality, and like coming out to everyone, that was really helpful. Yeah, and the more I came out to people, the more I got responses like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. I didn't think anyone else at our school like dealt with that. And I was like, no, there are so many people. And yeah, and so came across some really cool community, and yeah, God has guided me in a lot of ways and grown me through my sexuality. And so I consider it a big gift from God, since it's drawn me so close to him, and it's forced me to ask important questions, get to know people, and be open. So yeah.
Something you just said right now, you said that it kind of was like a kind of like a sense of relief, like the more you tell people.
Yeah.
Um, what do you mean by that? Was it like a sense of relief to like, okay, I'm not the only one struggling with this, and it's like a lot to hold on to and like kind of just be quiet about it? Or was it like a sense of relief, like, oh yeah, like I can, I'm not the only sinner. I can continue to sin or something. Like, how was that for you? Like when you were telling people?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of work to keep it a secret, and that's just exhausting in and of itself. Because people talk about it, it comes up in church sometimes, and you're like, oh, I could speak from personal experience, but I'm gonna pretend I have no idea what I'm talking about, and um, yeah, it's just exhausting to keep it to yourself and like carry it yourself, and that kind of makes it worse as well because when you keep it to yourself, you're like, oh, it's something that's dangerous and heavy and um, can't show it to anyone, and so that just makes the problem heavier on you when it doesn't need to be that heavy. If you could
Mm.
just share it with other people.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I'm thinking of like like if we're in a little small group and like I have a sin that I'm dealing with and like I tell people, not only does it like kind of release like for me a sense of peace, like okay, like I'm struggling with this sin, like everybody knows about it now, um, but it feels better when other people are saying like, oh yeah, I'm struggling with that too. But was there like a sense of accountability? Because I think like when you tell people that you're struggling, sometimes they'll come in like, hey, so how are you doing? Like,
yeah,
what's going on? Like, was there
yeah.
that for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like my parents, my friends, and just like the queer community that I found at our school. That was definitely really nice because we had open conversations about it, about what we were feeling, what we were doing, and just do you have a crush on some person? What do you want to do about that? Just processing it because it's a lot to process. So,
Yeah. Um, that's awesome because I for some reason just assume like people are like, oh, okay, cool, we'll pray about it, and then go about your day. Because typically that's what happens anytime you share sin.
yeah.
I just feel like that's it feels like almost like for people it would be such a like scare, and they have to like check up on you or like either excessively or just
Hmm.
like get scared away where they don't check up on you.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wonder which one that would be for like that kind of sin.
Everyone's different. It really depends on the person. Some people they don't understand it at all, so they ignore it, and some people they don't understand it at all, so they ask a ton of questions. And then for the people that truly understand the experience, I feel like they help keep you accountable the best and care for you the best. So
Yeah. Okay. So in conversations about this, I wanted to ask you how you feel about the verse that says that homosexuality is an abomination. And we talked about it just like recently with the
yeah.
post I sent you. Um, and I just kind of want to like ask you what your take is on that. Like when you read it, crosses your mind. Do you like not read it anymore because it's just like engraved in you? Because like people are telling you like, hey, look, you're a sinner. Like
Yeah.
so. How do you like react and deal with that?
Yeah, I'm pretty much numb to that verse. It doesn't mean a lot to me. I've heard it 1,000 times. I've read it, and I've done my own research on homosexuality in the Bible and various perspectives, and just saying to someone like, "Oh, look at this one verse where it says and it's an abomination." It's just not helpful. That's a very like narrow lens, and I've looked through so many lenses already. I've done so much research where it's like, yeah, you can say that, but have you really thought about it? Have you asked these questions? Have you talked to a ton of people like I have? It's like when you quote that verse to a queer person, it's like we know. We've heard it and we don't need to hear it again because we've thought about it way more than you have because it applies to us and it bothers us, so we pursue it.
What are some of those views that like someone that hasn't done like, not saying that you got to go deep into theology, but like just kind of skim the surface, like for someone that like reads that and then just keeps reading, right, doesn't
Yeah.
really like get the context of it.
Yeah, so they're basically like three sides that we talk about in the Christian world. There's side A for affirming, which is like gay is okay. God affirms gay relationships, and God's okay with it because of the research we've done in Bible translation. We don't think it's an accurate translation, or it's taken out of context based on how homosexuality was dealt with in the ancient world. So that's side A. There's side B, which is non-affirming, which says, no, the translation is accurate. Homosexuality is a sin. It's not affirmed by God. But feeling those attractions is normal. Lots of people experience that. It's just a matter of like abstinence and how you're going to honor God with your body. And there's like range within that. So that's side B, and then there's side X, which I just treat as completely invalid. try not to invalidate people's opinions, but I'm going to invalidate this one, where it's like, if you even feel those attractions, if you identify with any sort of queer identity, that in itself is sinful. Don't even have those thoughts. Don't even feel those feelings. Like, shut it down. That's a sin. You're a sin. You're a mistake. And so that's like Westboro Baptist Church level. And so that's side X. Don't be side X.
Okay. And now that we're really like kind of getting deeper, I'd like for you to just kind of share some of like the definitions that are within your like category, I guess. So like, how do you identify, and like what are your terms and all that stuff, and like, yeah.
So when I first questioned my sexuality in 8th grade, I identified as bisexual, which means just attracted to men and women. And then as time went on, I found the word pansexual, and I thought that was more accurate. And the difference between those is really depends on how many genders you think there are. And I think it's always important to, even if you don't understand the gender conversation, just respect people's genders, use their pronouns, because it's more of a respect issue than a personal belief issue. So bisexual, the definition has changed over time as people have explored gender more to mean just attraction to more than one gender. So it could be 3, 4, 5 genders, whatever. But the point is, like, bisexual is gender specific. You're attracted to specific genders, whereas pansexual is like whoever. I'm attracted to any gender. Gender isn't a factor in my attraction. So I felt that was more accurate. And then there's just gay, lesbian. I feel like everyone's familiar with those. Asexual, where you feel little to no sexual attraction. Trying to think of others. Any ones that you've come across where you're like, what is that?
Yeah, there's I think there's agender.
Agender, not identifying with any gender. So like, if gender's a spectrum, you've ascended it. You're not on it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you, because this is a conversation that's like kind of roaming and has been roaming. What do you say to people that are a little more on the conservative side on this topic and say like, oh no, I'm not gonna call you by your pronoun. Like, why should I change the way that I like have been raised and know that there's only he, she, and go out of my way to go and tell you that, you know, you believe you're a goose. Why should I go and do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's a matter of like respect, and what really helped me in this conversation was understanding gender dysphoria. That's like a term I didn't hear until college. And so basically gender dysphoria is, it's recognized in the psychology world as not identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth. Like, there is a disconnect between your identity and your gender, and that can take a lot of forms. But the biggest experience I've heard about is people just feeling not at home in their bodies, which I think is a very natural human experience. A lot of people go through that, where if you're struggling with your weight, you might feel not at home in your body, feel trapped in your body. If you have body dysmorphia, you feel like your body's your enemy, you need to control it, you need to fix it. And so I feel like with gender dysphoria, it's a similar situation where you feel alien from your body. You don't know, like, you don't know who your body is. You don't feel connected with it. It's not you. And that's really hard for the average person to understand. A cisgender person identifies with the gender they were given at birth. So like me, you. So for a cisgender person, it's like impossible to understand how you don't connect with your own body, you don't connect with your own gender, because it's so deeply intertwined in our identities that it seems impossible when we hear about it from someone else.
Yeah. In simple terms, kind of like you're born as a baby and they give you a blue blanket and they say
Yeah.
you're a boy, and then you're born a girl and they give you a pink blanket and they say like that's your color. That's kind of, they give you good like top like dolls, and they give the guy, monster trucks and like action figures. That's kind of how like the conversation goes, and then that develops deeper and deeper and so on and so on.
And so when it comes to using people's pronouns, if someone has struggled with gender dysphoria, like disrespecting their pronouns, or if they've changed their name, that's actually really traumatic and triggering, because they've had this battle with their self their whole life and figuring out who they are and feeling alienated from their own body and trying to accept themselves. And so if you don't respect their pronouns or their name, you're actively like harming their progress in their growth and identity journey. You're triggering psychological trauma. You are attacking them and their growth, and it's more disrespectful than people realize. It's not just like words don't matter. No, words really matter. And yeah, you don't want to be the person who is actively damaging someone's mental health, because that's what it comes down to. So
yeah. And personally, I'm still trying to kind of find that balance, because I think at least in California, there's been more of that push of just kind of respect people's terms and stuff, especially like in a workplace. You can get fired, you can get sued for like discrimination and like like all that stuff. So like at some point, you're going to be put in a position where you do have to respect those things. So it's kind of difficult. And like if you're really like super conservative and you don't, then you might lose your job. Or like if you're not in a position in that, like I think at one point you'll cross someone. So I don't know. That's like really ultimately that the person's decision to take. I personally wouldn't want to be disrespecting everybody like walking around. But I don't know if I'm ready to just go and like, I don't know, like it's like a lot to process. So like I said, just kind of do your research, kind of really go deep into this. Another thing I wanted to ask you was, because we're talking about like, growing up and being deeply rooted into this like gender and identity, do you feel like you've got placed on like a more of a feminist, uprooted like, foundation?
Yeah, I have definitely found a lot of clarity in feminism, because it really just spoke to my experience, like growing up as a girl, but also being like a really dominant, aggressive, competitive personality, like stereotypically masculine. I always felt like really bothered with phrases like throw like a girl, run like a girl. Like, no, I'm faster than you. Don't talk to me like that. And so, yeah, with feminism and just explaining like just biases we have built into our language, and I don't know, patriarchal structures built into our society. Like, we don't have time to unpack all of that. But it explained a lot of my experience and a lot of the ways in which I was bothered by my own femininity and didn't want to identify with that because it was treated as weaker, and I didn't see myself as weak. So yeah, it's been a fun journey of accepting femininity as beautiful, as good, as equal to masculinity, which it's a fun conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the other questions I want to ask you is gender a social construct, or is that how God established it to be? And is sex a social construct, or is that how God established it to be?
Yeah, so when I used to hear people say gender is a social construct, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I I see what body parts I have, other people have other body parts. That seems pretty objectively clear.
Yeah.
I don't see what's constructed about it. But then I realized that the definition of gender has totally changed. And language is fluid. I'm an English major. You can't control how language changes. And so basically, gender gender describes a person's identity and expression of who they are, of their identity. Whereas sex refers solely to like biological sex, body parts, hormones, all that fun stuff. And that distinction was drawn because the trans community pointed out like, hey, there's this disconnect here for us that cisgender people don't realize can exist for some people. And so, yeah, when you start treating gender as expression, as identity, you realize that we assign to gender colors, pink and blue, activities, careers. Like if I say doctor, you think of a man.
Yeah.
If I say teacher, you probably think of a woman. And it seems fairly evident that women don't naturally love the color pink or just, and there's a lot of debate about what is natural for men and for women, but there are also a lot of gray areas where like, yeah, no, women can do other things, women can like other things, and men can explore those things as well. It's not inherently built into our DNA. And so once you realize that, then you do realize there are parts of gender that are social constructs where it's like, yeah, I was told this is how I might turn out, but I actually turned out this way. And that's not wrong. It's just not what I expected. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the constructed part comes in. And then as for sex, I wouldn't say sex is a social construct because it's more of a scientific term. But it is definitely complex and nuanced and not simple male-female, because there's a huge intersex community. Like 2% of the world's population is intersex, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 2% of the world is also redheads. So it is a lot. And so the intersex community can have, what are they called? Like gonads, like body parts that are mixed or absent, hormones that are mixed, off balance, or you can even have multiple chromosomes. Like you can have XXXXYYY chromosomes. Like there's no limit to it. And so yeah, sex is definitely more complicated, and you can't put it into categories of man or woman because there's so much in between, and a lot of it we don't even know because we don't even research that part of our bodies. Like you don't go to a doctor's appointment and ask, what are my chromosomes? Like you don't even know. Yeah. So it's very complex.
How do you feel about like, because traditionally it's like put the boys in that room, put the girls in that room.
Yeah.
And I think there's some like healthy stuff to that, and some stuff like where like, I don't know, they can benefit from like intertwining, because you can kind of see how different you are and how similar you are in many ways. Mm-hmm. There was a video that posted that said like, oh, like people want to get rid of that. Well, like see if they like this. And it was a video of like, there was girls running on a track and jumping these trampolines. And then a guy comes and just like smokes all of them. And I'm like you guys, you know, is this like what we're headed towards? Like, what is this? How do you feel about that? Because there's also this transition of like having transsex like bathrooms, and like so anyone can just, you know, that's not labeled woman and man. It's just there's a bathroom, just go in. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting example of like sports, which for me, as I understand it now, research could change over time, but like that's pretty much the only area in which men are different from women, where it's like men are usually more powerful and faster, and women have like better endurance, or we just vary in those ways. Outside of that, bathrooms, I don't really care. I have my individual stall anyway, and I don't care what you're doing. I hope you don't care what I'm doing in the bathroom. And if you do care, that sounds like more of a you problem. Anyway, And also, I think separating kids, like, in class and stuff like that, I feel like that reinforces the idea of, like, there's something forbidden between us. There's, um, yeah, like curiosity, but it's forbidden. And it's already starting that narrative at a really young age when kids don't actually experience sexual attraction. Like, that only really starts at puberty. Kids are asexual. Research shows that. And so if you start that narrative when they're really little, when kids don't even really know what's going on, that sets up for a lot of like competition between the genders, which can be healthy or unhealthy. Um, a lot of fear. Women fear men a lot. We're always scared of like being attacked. And so like with the bathroom conversation, a lot of women are like, I don't want a man in the bathroom. He could take advantage of me. And it's like, well, maybe we need to address that as a society and not necessarily worry about our bathrooms. And yeah, so I feel like that separation can send a lot of messages that we're not aware of. They can be good, they can be bad, but my impression is a lot of them are bad, and so I think there needs to be a lot of reconciling between the genders, if anything.
Okay. I need to give you a definition of this. So one of the terms is egalitarianism, and the other one is complementarian. And so I'll just read some definitions. If you don't know them, if you do, great. But I'm just going to read them anyway. So the egalitarian view is pretty much this idea like of how marriage should work. Also, kind of like in some ways a church. so what it so what it reads is, although God made us male and female, gender-based roles distinctions are the result of the fall and should not be made by Christians. Equality in essence demands no gender distinctions in roles and ways of relating. And the complementary view says gender distinct roles are part of God's created design, and although disordered by the fall, they are to be expressed in a relationship between men and women, especially in church and family. Um, so, in other words, egalitarian kind of pushes for um, like in the sense of a church that anybody can lead. So a woman can be a pastor, a guy can be a pastor, they can be co-pastors. Um, in a relationship, it would mean that the woman can take out the trash too. It's not just the guy. The woman can pay bills because I think the tradition is man stays at home, or I mean man goes to work, woman stays at home. She's a stay-home mom. She takes care of the kids. So in egalitarian view, it can be vice versa. Complementary would be the opposite, like kind of the traditional man's the pastor, man stays the leader, or there's like an eldership. Um, and so there's different churches that have applied that. One of the churches that I know of that is kind of egalitarian is it's called VU Church. It's in Miami, and it's by Richard Wilkerson Jr. and his wife, and they kind of both pastor the church. I personally have not seen anything like destructive about it. The girl can preach. I don't know how comfortable I feel about it, but I have heard some of her messages and they're good. And so I just kind of wanted to ask you, which one do you kind of relate to, and like what's appealing and what's not?
Yeah, I definitely grew up with a complementary complementarian.
Yeah.
Complementarian. I grew up with a complementarian mindset because that's what I had always seen, always heard. But going through college, I questioned that a lot more, learned about feminism. And I definitely lean more egalitarian now. I don't see, based on my research of the Bible and church history, I don't see a lot of reason for women not to lead, for women not to be treated as an equal partner in a relationship, based on context, word choice, translation, and all that. Again, just do your own research because I can't explain all of that. I don't even have the resources to explain all of that. But yeah, I definitely lean egalitarian, and I think mostly because I sense in myself, like I said, I have more of a masculine personality, and so I've always struggled to understand like what's wrong with me being the way, I am? If God created me this way, why not use these talents to the best of my ability? Because I feel like that's what honors God the most. And so that led me to a lot of research and the conclusions I have now. And there's still a lot of debate about it, and that's totally understandable. So, if anything, just be respectful to a female pastor. That's probably what's going to get you farthest in life.
So the last question I have for you is, why support an LGBT community when they can endanger the God-given roles and views on marriage, possibly confuse a child whose parents want him to be raised a Christian or want him to be raised like a certain way? Why support the community?
Yeah.
As a Christian.
Yeah. The obvious reason is because God tells us to love everyone, and by disrespecting the LGBTQ community, you are actively driving them away from the church, away from God, and that's the opposite of the gospel. We should be spreading the gospel to everyone. And I consider myself living proof that queer people can be Christians. It's not contradictory, and it's a different experience. It's a hard experience to understand, but I think it's worthwhile to live this experience and engage with people who live this experience. And then as for confusing kids, like, I was confused as a kid. I grew up thinking I was straight. So I think there's a lot of freedom in exposing your kids to people who have very different experiences and being like, look, they are working to grow and know God regardless of their situation. And I think that's really admirable, and something we can embrace in the church. And yeah, love your neighbor. And your neighbor might love you back, and we'll be a stronger church. So I don't see many downsides to showing respect, asking questions, and being open regardless of where your beliefs fall now or in the future.
Yeah. And I want to just kind of be clear, like, I know a lot of this is just kind of dependent on translation, interpretation of text, and like what you believe, what kind of church you grew up in. And so if you're watching this video and you were like, I totally agree, or like, I totally disagree, then that's the point. Like, the point is for you to have these conversations. Like, if you disagree, then, reach out to me, reach out to Micah, and have those conversations. That's why we're making these videos. Have these conversations with your pastors, your elders, your friends, your family, and ask those questions and see where it takes you. And don't be afraid to just kind of compare theology and see where it lines up. And it doesn't have to be about like, you're wrong and I'm right. It's just having those conversations and just kind of getting to know where God is. And yeah, ultimately, this is something that we're going to see till God comes again. And I can't wait for that. And so thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
See ya.